Welcome to What in Bible. Today we're exploring one of Jesus' most challenging and counterintuitive teachings, love your enemies. This command has been called revolutionary, impossible, naive, and transformative. Some dismiss it as impractical idealism, while others recognize it as the profound core of Jesus' ethical vision. In our polarized world of tribal politics, culture wars, and online outrage, this teaching feels more relevant and more difficult than ever. We're constantly encouraged to view those who disagree with us not just as wrong, but as threats. The very idea of loving our enemies seems foreign to our natural instincts. But what did Jesus actually mean when he commanded us to love our enemies? Was he suggesting warm, fuzzy feelings toward those who harm us, ignoring injustice, becoming a doormat, or was he offering a radically different path that transforms both us and our adversaries? Today we'll explore 4 key passages where Jesus and the early church addressed this concept. We'll unpack the original context, examine what this love practically entails, and discover how this counterintuitive command might be exactly what our divided world needs most. Let's start with Jesus' most direct teaching on loving enemies, found in the Sermon on the Mount. You have heard that it was said, "You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward have you? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brethren only, what do you do more than others? Do not even tax collectors do so? Therefore you shall be perfect, just as your Father in heaven is perfect." First, notice the context. Jesus begins by referencing a common teaching of his day: love your neighbor and hate your enemy. While love your neighbor comes from Leviticus 19:18, the Old Testament never commands hatred of enemies. This hate your enemy addition had become a cultural interpretation that limited the scope of love to one's own group. Jesus directly challenges this limited vision, calling his followers to a love that crosses tribal boundaries and extends even to those who actively oppose them. Second, look at how Jesus defines this love. It's not primarily about feelings, but actions. Bless, do good, and pray for. This love is expressed through concrete behaviors toward those who curse, hate, and persecute. It's active, not passive. Third, consider Jesus' motivation. He grounds this teaching in God's character, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. God shows impartial kindness by providing sunshine and rain for both the righteous and unrighteous. When we love enemies, we reflect God's character. Finally, Jesus emphasizes the distinctiveness of this approach. If you love those who love you, what reward have you? Anyone can love those who are lovable or part of their in-group. Jesus calls his followers to a higher, more challenging standard that distinguishes them from the prevailing culture. This passage doesn't ask us to approve of evil actions or pretend harm doesn't exist. It calls us to respond differently than our natural instincts would dictate, to break the cycle of reciprocal hatred with deliberate acts of blessing, goodness, and prayer. While Jesus' Sermon on the Mount provides the direct command, his parable of the Good Samaritan illustrates what loving enemies might actually look like in practice. But he, wanting to justify himself, said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Then Jesus answered and said, "A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, who stripped him of his clothing, wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a certain priest came down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise, a Levite, when he arrived at the place, came and looked, and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. So he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. And he set him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. On the next day, when he departed, he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said to him, 'Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I come again, I will repay you.' The power of this parable comes from understanding the deep hatred between Jews and Samaritans in Jesus' day. This wasn't a mild dislike, it was a generations-old ethnic and religious hostility. Jews considered Samaritans heretics and half-breeds. Samaritans obstructed Jewish pilgrimage routes and desecrated their temples. These groups were enemies. By making a Samaritan the hero who helps a Jewish victim, Jesus deliberately challenges his audience prejudice. The parable doesn't just suggest abstract love, it portrays concrete, costly action across enemy lines. Notice the Samaritan's response. He had compassion. The Greek word here, esplanishte, refers to a gut-level emotional response. This wasn't cold duty, but genuine care that moved him into action. He bandaged wounds, transported the victim, paid for his care, and promised to return. This was comprehensive, practical help that required time, effort, and financial sacrifice. The parable ends with Jesus asking, "Which of these three do you think was neighbor to him who fell among the thieves?" When the questioner replies, "He who showed mercy," Jesus commands, "Go and do likewise." This parable teaches us that loving enemies means seeing their humanity despite group differences, responding with practical help to their genuine needs, being willing to cross social boundaries at personal cost, defining neighbor by opportunity to help, not by group identity. When Jesus says love your enemies, he's calling us to this kind of concrete, compassionate action, and not just sentimental feelings. While Jesus' teachings on loving enemies are profound, his lived example provides the most powerful illustration. And when they had come to the palace called Calvary, there they crucified him, and the criminals, one on the right hand and the other on the left. Then Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do." And they divided his garments and cast lots. In his moment of greatest suffering, betrayed, falsely accused, mocked, tortured, and executed, Jesus demonstrates what loving enemies looks like in its most extreme form. While experiencing the worst humanity could inflict, he responds not with curses or threats, but with a prayer for forgiveness. Notice that Jesus doesn't minimize the wrong being done. He doesn't say, "This isn't really that bad," or "These people aren't really my enemies." He acknowledges that they need forgiveness precisely because they are doing something terribly wrong. Yet he seeks their good, their forgiveness, rather than their punishment. Jesus offers an insight into enemy love with the phrase, "They do not know what they do." He recognizes that people often act out of ignorance, fear, or distorted understanding. This doesn't excuse their actions, but helps explain them and create space for compassion alongside justice. This example challenges us to consider, if Jesus could love those actively killing him, what might it look like for us to love those who merely disagree with us, inconvenience us, or speak against us? Jesus sets an impossibly high standard, yet calls us to follow in his steps. Crucially, this doesn't mean accepting abuse or injustice. Jesus' prayer doesn't prevent him from speaking truth to power elsewhere or confronting wrong. Enemy love isn't weakness, it's strength expressed in a different form than retaliation. The early church lived in a hostile environment where persecution was common. How did they apply Jesus' teaching on loving enemies? Paul's letter to the Romans provides practical guidance. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice, and weep with those who weep. Be of the same mind toward one another. Do not set your mind on high things, but associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own opinion. Repay no one evil for evil. Have regard for good things in the sight of all men, if it is possible, as much as depends on you. Live peaceably with all men. Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath. For it is written, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord." Therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink, for in so doing, you will heap coals of fire on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. This passage offers several practical aspects of loving enemies. First, speak well of those who mistreat you. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. This involves controlling our speech, refusing to demonize opponents, and finding truthful, positive things we can say even about those who harm us. Second, practice empathy across dividing lines. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. This means recognizing our shared humanity and entering into both the joys and sorrows of those we might consider opponents. Third, pursue peace proactively. If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Note the realistic qualifiers. If it is possible, and as much as depends on you, acknowledging that peace isn't always achievable despite our best efforts. Fourth, leave justice to God. Beloved, First, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath. This isn't abandoning justice, but recognizing that personal vengeance typically escalates conflict rather than resolving it. Fifth, meet basic human needs. If your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. Like the Good Samaritan, we can demonstrate love through practical care for fundamental needs. Finally, practice strategic goodness. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. This is perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of enemy love. It's not just about enduring evil, but actively overcoming it through deliberate goodness. The controversial phrase, "heap coals of fire on his head," likely refers to an ancient Egyptian practice of carrying hot coals in a pan on one's head as a sign of repentance. The point isn't to harm our enemy, but to lead them to a change of heart through unexpected kindness. So what did Jesus really mean when he said, "Love your enemies"? Based on these passages, we can conclude enemy love is primarily about action, not feelings. It involves blessing, doing good, praying for, and meeting the needs of those who oppose us. Enemy love doesn't mean approving harmful actions or denying injustice. Jesus and Paul both acknowledge wrongdoing while responding differently than expected. Enemy love is realistic about human limitations, if it is possible, while still pushing us beyond our comfort zones. Enemy love is distinctive. It's meant to set Jesus' followers apart from normal cultural patterns of retaliation and tribal loyalty. Enemy love reflects God's character and follows Christ's example, even in the most difficult circumstances. In our polarized world, this teaching feels both more challenging and more necessary than ever. Loving our enemies doesn't mean abandoning our convictions or tolerating abuse. It means responding to hostility with a different spirit, one that seeks transformation rather than triumph, reconciliation rather than dominance. This might look like refusing to demonize those with opposing political views, praying for the well-being of those who have hurt us, speaking truth without dehumanizing language, seeking to understand perspectives we disagree with, meeting practical needs across tribal boundaries. Jesus' command to love our enemies isn't a naive ideal. It's a revolutionary practice that has the power to break cycles of hatred and transform both us and our adversaries. In a world quick to choose sides and slow to show mercy, this countercultural love might be exactly what our divided communities need most. Thank you for joining us today on What in Bible. If this exploration has challenged you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need this perspective. Until next time, may you find the courage and strength to love even those most difficult to love.